Hi guys, this is Raw Mongoose, and in this video we're going to be looking at the history of Peter Green's pickups. Not only is Peter's guitar one of the most famous guitars in rock history, but it also has one of the most famous tones as well. And this really was defined by the modified humbuckers on this actual guitar. One of the big questions has always been who did this work. Peter himself mostly downplayed the subject and the guitar in general. He often said that it was a funny old fuddy-duddy with a neck like a tree trunk. And if, like me, you would have researched this subject on any of the guitar forums, you would have seen one name come up. Sam Lee, spelled S-A-M-L-I. Sam was working in the Selma store's basement in 1967 when the guitar was handed in for repair. We now know there were certain subtle but crucial hallmarks associated with the repair work, which all pointed to Sam Lee's handiwork. In fact, a friend of mine, Phil Harris, says, "It wasn't a modification, it was a cock-up." If you look at early shots of Green with John Mayall's Blues Breakers, the bass pickup had stopped working because back in those days, a lot of these pickups, the windings were way too tight. Eventually they broke. So when the bass pickup stopped working, Peter gave it to Selma and it ended up with Sam. Sam then rewound it, but he rewound it in the wrong gauge wire. He also put a leader cable on it that's nothing to do with a Gibson. It's like a plastic shielded piece of cable. It's totally wrong for a humbucker pickup. So he fitted the wrong leader cable and he used coil winders more suited to Fender pickups than Gibson humbuckers. One good thing he did was underwind it. That's good for tone. I don't think any of this was a conscious effort either. I just think that's what he thought was best at the time. And then the final thing he did was put the magnet under the coils in the wrong way round. That reverses the polarity, which basically creates an out of phase type sound when you put both pickups together. And then he put the pickup in the wrong way round. So when you see the pickup, instead of the pole pieces facing the neck, they're facing to the bottom. Both pickups are facing the same way. It was a combination of mistakes. We'll never know if Sam actually meant to do this or not, but it really seems unlikely. Sam Lee's handiwork at the Selma basement sometime in 1967 served to modify this guitar that would become nothing short of iconic as time passed on. Phil Harris goes on to say about Sam Lee, his electronics were apparently pretty bad. I heard he really struggled with it. Really, he was a woodwork man, not a wiring man. But in the day back then, back in late 67, he would have just turned his hand to whatever was involved in the job. Steve Clark, who's a guitar technician and journalist, says, "People that work with guitars have different strengths. I can do resprays and I will do them if I have to, but I know guys who can do them better than I can." But with Sam, it sounds like while he had a degree of knowledge of electronics and wiring and wouldn't shy away from doing it, his real strength was on the wood side of things. In that area, I know he was very, very good. I know that he almost certainly did the work on Peter Green's guitar because I saw the wiring on a guitar Sam built from scratch that was played by Slade's Dave Hill. It was a fascinating instrument and the overall build quality was wonderful, but the soldering really wasn't very good. I've looked closely at Peter Green's guitar about 4 years ago in an old mill in Stockport, Greater Manchester. The guy who was selling it, Richard Henry, gave me a call. I only had a very short time with it, but I remember the front pickup wiring having a grey outer insulation going to the control cavity. It reminded me immediately of Dave Hill's guitar, in that the wiring to the famous neck pickup is almost identical to the wiring on Dave Hill's guitar. In fact, the piece of grey wire that comes from underneath the humbucker shouldn't even be there. It's the kind of wire you might find in a DIY store to fix your grandmother's table lamp. The same wiring is in both the guitars, but it worked. As the story goes, shortly before Green left Fleetwood Mac in 1970, he loaned the guitar to Irish guitarist Gary Moore, who at the same time was a teenager and relatively unknown. Moore actually ended up purchasing the Les Paul for the same price paid by Green a few years earlier. The number was again said to be in the region of £150. Mark Moffat, former manager of Top Gear in Denmark Street, says, "I was in the shop the day Gary bought Peter's guitar. He brought it in to show it off to us pretty much immediately after he picked it up. We all discussed the out of phase pickup. Gary didn't know the specifics of the electronics, but he confirmed that it was Sam Lee who had worked on the guitar." There's a famous story that circulated about a meeting between Green and Moore sometime in the early 80s. Peter had apparently been playing a little guitar again and had by chance ended up at the same studio where Moore was recording. The two talked and Green noticed Greenie on a stand in the room. As the two left the room, Peter apparently passed his hand gently across Greenie's strings as he walked out, as Moore later intimated, to restore something of himself back into the guitar. Phil Harris says, "I heard through the grapevine that Peter Green never really liked that guitar after Gary Moore had it, because Gary thrashed the life out of it. Peter liked shiny looking new guitars, and Greenie wasn't ever like that after Gary had it." In Greenie's case, no pickguard was ever used. Peter apparently had removed it when he first bought the guitar from Selma. Joel Danzig, Hamer's guitar co-founder, says, "My recollection of the Peter Green guitar was limited but vivid. The subject of the out of phase middle position came up. I suggested we take a look inside. Electrically, the controls looked fairly intact. There may have been a new lead on either the switch or one pickup, I can't say for sure, but the wiring seemed to be correct and that it was soldered up correctly. I knew that the pickups were out of phase because I'd built hundreds of guitars with that configuration, not to mention having handled dozens of 57 to 60 PAF LP standards, ES335s as a vintage dealer. It was unmistakable on recordings and in the flesh. I suggested that we use a compass to check the magnetic orientation of the pickups, and sure enough, one magnet had been flipped 180 degrees. This happened occasionally at the Gibson factory, but it could also have been done inadvertently by a repairman. I can't remember for sure which one it was, but my guess would be the neck pickup, because it looked like it may have been worked on at some point. Of course, you can reverse the wires in the pickup internally if you disassemble the pickup, but if this was so and the magnet was flipped as well, you'd be back to in phase. Turning the entire pickup around in the guitar doesn't change the phase, as some people have surmised incorrectly. Your story about the repairman makes sense to me. I'd be interested to know if the magnet has been checked by anyone else." Gary Moore sold the Les Paul in 2006 to Phil Winfield at Maverick Music. Phil Harris says, "I had Greenie in my possession for nearly 2 years. I wasn't the official owner, more a custodian. I've owned over 70 Les Pauls from the 58, 59 and 60 era. I think I've had more than anyone of that particular model. Contrary to popular conception, Greenie doesn't, in my opinion, have an unusually thick neck. It's not a slim neck, but it's always felt lovely, although it's been snapped. The resonant tone remains great and the pickups are great, although the outputs are really quite low and more tonal. Another interesting thing about Greenie is its headstock pitch. In relation to other 59s, Greenie's pitch is 2 degrees further forward. Even though things have been changed, the pots, tuners, the bridge and the jack socket plate, it still definitely has got something about it. Gary actually broke the original bridge and first replaced it with the chrome 60s bridge. Then in the 90s he put a reproduction Gibson ABR1 bridge on there. Having played it when Gary first got it and many years later, it definitely felt older, but fundamentally the same." Okay guys, hope you've enjoyed this video. This is Goose signing out. Take care and see you in the next video.